maybe.
Hello, we're live. Well, hello there. Welcome everybody to our monthly live stream series from the Museum of Glass. Whether you're joining us in person, there are a few people here, or online, it's always a pleasure. For those of you new to this is something, as I said, we do every single month on the third Sunday here at the Museum of Glass in the theater. And today we have the distinct pleasure of having the wonderful musician and composer and brilliant musical mind, the wonderful Ollie Jackson here today with us to discuss music and life and the universe. Ollie, thanks for being here.
Hey, my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Museum of Glass. Thank you, all of the participants. Thank you, our educators that are live here in direct. You can hear them roaring in the back. No, it's a pleasure to be here. To be in the world and to garner a couple of lessons and some experiences that hopefully those can inspire and bring people closer to their true purpose.
Well said. Before we started, Ollie was regaling us with some amazing poetry that I was not expecting, and it was quite deep and quite good. We're not going to get into that right now. But in the spirit of thanks, we also need to thank, of course, the Museum of Glass for having us, and all of our sponsors, Tacoma Creates, KNKX, Ted Brown Music, Titusville Cars, and Edward Jones Financial Consultant Rick Gray. Their generous support makes this possible, and all of you guys just participating makes this possible as well. So thank you. So, Ollie, there's always a bunch of fascinating things to talk about. Our own conversations, and I'm trying to remember some of these things that we can discuss today. But since last time you were here, what I want to dig into a little bit is you completed a new ballet. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. In early 2023, I was commissioned to compose a ballet and perform a work with a longtime collaborator, Hope Boykin. You could look her up. That's Hope, Hope, Boykin, Boykin, dance. She's got a social media presence along with a really deep website she's kind of a polymath person. She's a poet and amazing dancer. So her tenure with Alvin Ailey was over 20 years. She danced with Ailey. She was a principal in that company for a long time. And if anyone knows the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, it's one of the, it's the epitome of kind of American modern dance. It's one of the largest companies and most decorated companies, most diverse companies on earth. So I think this ballet in 2023, it's entitled States of Hope. It's kind of a introspective about the life of a dancer. It's very personal work, Hope's work. And it's not just a ballet, actually. It's more of a theatrical work. It has a ballet inside of it. So it's kind of a whole new genre. I've never seen, I didn't realize, and she directed it as well. So it's a pretty involved work. And this is our 8th collaboration. So I was able to kind of compose. I look at music, and sometimes when you're working with a multifaceted disciplines, you have to kind of get inside of the head of what they envision visually, what the movement is going to be, what are the tempos, what are the dynamics, what are the characters, what are all of these different moving parts. So in this work, we basically narrowed it down to certain aspects, about, character, certain elements or like emotion. So there's one, it's the daughter of Job. There's one that's one of the characters. What are the other characters? One is determined, that characteristic. One is, what is it? Oh, a holy roller, like, somebody that's just prays praising for everyone. Another one is, well, they go into all of these different aspects. You can get into, I don't want to go too deep into all of them, but it's about 12 different movements in the work, and I composed the piece from a musical standpoint for it to be played live. So instrumentation is for like a quintet, which features a rhythm section, piano, bass, drums, saxophone, tenor saxophone, and trumpet. However, we're not playing it live. We're, it's recorded, but the idea is at some point it'll be played live.
Many musicians, at least my generation, know you as a tremendous drummer and musician and composer, which obviously you are. And many people that don't, if they read your bio, it says, Aretha Franklin, KRS-One, Willie Nelson, Norah Jones, all these people. And going on, Branford Marsalis, Wynton Marsalis, Kenny Garrett, Joshua Redman, everybody. When did you start composing more, or collaborating, I should say, with choreographers? Because obviously you were writing music or arranging for jazz configurations or other musical collaborations. But when did it start? When did you just begin writing ballets and doing work of that nature?
Well, writing in general, it takes you, it's like patience. For one, you got to have patience, and you got to look at things from a perspective of, well, how can I get these ideas out of my head and put them on paper or in the context of a group? So that's number one. So composing, I probably started at like 12, 13, where, you have to do like assignments. My father actually, before he passed, when I was a kid, we'd have assignments of writing things on a blues. Okay, you got to write a blues. And it's just little things, but those little things turn into bigger things. And then it's like, oh, well, how can I do this? And what are the ranges of instruments, or like orchestration and sounds? And so how do I get those on paper? So that's the first thing. With the writing aspect. Then arranging music is also a part of writing, because you take songs that you already know, and then you could take those songs and say, okay, well, I want to play it like this. Let me play this song with a hip-hop beat on it. So that's an arrangement. Even though it doesn't seem like it's a lot, it's a big difference. So you just basically change the style, and so then you have to play it in that style of vernacular. It's like people that do impersonations. So it's kind of like that. You know a different way of doing it. So the idea of arranging something and then composing something, you have to have vocabulary. So as you develop vocabulary, you learn more music and more songs. Like, let's say you learn a bunch of standards, so then you have a base of like, okay, here's a ballad, here's an up-tempo song, here's a pocket song, or here's a nursery rhyme. So you have all of these different things that you say, oh, these are palettes or these sounds. And then so you start taking those things and then mixing them with the ideas of like, well, what if I, or counterfacts. Here's the harmony of a song, and let me write a different melody to it. So that's just like an evolution. Now with dance is very closely related to rhythm. So being a percussionist and learning like African or Senegalese, Congolese drumming, like djembe, junjun, as a young person, you understand movement, and like your main drummer marking the dancers, and then everyone holding the groove. So you see that relationship. So with movement, rhythm and movement, and then like what tempos work for dancers. And then also you have tap dancers. I play with a lot of tap dancers. Like, what can you play that enhances, or like the tempos that fit well with movement? Well, that's another aspect. So my collaborations with, let's say, composing specifically for dance come out of an idea or stories. So one of my early works, one of the first ballets I wrote with Hope Boykin, or long form work, like 40-minute piece was called Watching Go By the Day. So it's about somebody's day. Like they get up in the morning, alarm clock, they get up, they're groggy, they wake up, they're trying to get their day started, and all of the things that happen in the course of a day. So all of the movement. So how do you tell that same story musically? And I used also the construct or influenced by all of my time with Wynton Marsalis, who also composed for ballet. He did something with Peter Martins with the New York City Ballet. He did something with Twyla Tharp, who I played on those works as a young person. So I kind of see the relationships between a choreographer and a composer and how those things work. Playing with a great tap dancer in Detroit when I was young, under the tutelage of Roy Brooks, a great percussionist, musician. This tap dancer named Flash Beaver, great tap dancer and showman. So how do you play with these people? So all of these things are like innate things of how do you interact and how do you work with inside of an environment and a construct. So those things inspired me to say, okay, well, these things I know work. So I can use, it gives you a automatic palette of like, okay, these things work. Then if you have time to work on a piece and you go back and forth with a choreographer, generally a choreographer waits for the music and then they choreograph to the music that you present to them. And if they don't like it, they generally come back and give you some notes and say, hey, well, look, can this be faster? Can this be slower? Can you leave more space? Or can this be more sparse? So space in the sense of just no sound, and then also space in the context of not a lot of things going on. And it just made me think about this because we were just talking. A wise person once said, in music, there's only really no more than 2 or 3 things going on at one time. And people go like, well, what do you mean by that? Any good music, generally, and I would say specifically in Western music or modern contemporary music, you got a beat, right? And generally there's a melody. Nowadays, there's no melody in the music, so I don't even know what these young people listen to. There's no melody, there's no harmony. It's just like a beat and a bunch of people mumbling over the top of it. But generally, if you think of, let's say, European classical music, you have a theme. You might have 2 things or like a counterpoint. So if you have counterpoint, it's very difficult for that's a counter melody, for there also to be harmony on top of that. So you have a theme and a counter melody or counterpoint. And then, percussion is color. There's no like groove going on. And generally the rhythm section of an orchestra are probably the strings that are moving or playing moving lines, and they're constantly moving, or upper woodwinds that are carrying the rhythm. You think of, let's say, popular music, you got drums and bass, which are holding the theme or the foundation, and the bass is the foundation of the harmony in the drums, and they're pretty much static. They play a beat, and then you have a vocalist or a melody that's on top of it and some chords, and generally they're not complicated. So if you have one complication, which, let's say, if you have a lot of dense harmony, it can't be going fast. That's just a rule of, you can do it. It generally won't sound, it sounds probably chaotic. If you just had a bunch of harmony just moving around, you'd be like, well, okay, what's going on? Now, that is an effect. There's no rule that says you can't do it, but there's not a lot of space. So it doesn't leave you space for anything else. It's the same, there's another kind of rule. If you have low instruments, like tubas and basses and low frequency instruments, their wave, if you look at it, they're huge. So from a physics standpoint, it takes more time for that particular sound to move. It doesn't move fast. So if you have low instruments playing a bunch of notes, you're not really going to hear them. They're not going to have the impact. Now, you could do it. They're great musicians that could do it, but musically, will it make sense? So high instruments, generally, like, big things move slow, small things move fast. It's just like rules of nature. So back to the dance world, all of these elements are important, and all of the instruments could represent a character in the music. So sometimes in certain works or pieces, let's say the bass might represent somebody that has integrity. You know, the piano or the melody of a piano or solo piano is very powerful. Probably from a all-encompassing aspect, the piano can do everything. It can, you know, it's a whole orchestra within itself. So it's learning how to use all of the elements of all of the instruments to help tell a story or tell themes. And generally, I always like to come up with the storyline or outline before I write a piece. And so those are things that I learned from, you know, being around Buster Williams, who I had an opportunity to tour with. Definitely working on long form pieces from Wynton, of like how he would lay out or outline a work and just say, hey, look, you got a long piece, so how are you going to break it up? And then also give everyone an opportunity to play and be featured. So all of those little details about how you set up a work, and, you know, it's kind of like a big puzzle. So like, how do you design it or lay it out? But back to the dance piece that I kind of veered off, just talking about the elements or devices used in composing. With dance, sometimes the choreographer will have choreography, and this is something that was very deep to me and very enlightening, working with some really amazing dancers, choreographers. They could dance to music that's temp music, just because it fits a tempo, and they can dance to it and be like, oh, she's like, yeah, don't worry about that. Like, they're not fixed to the music, like in their brains. Like for us, we'd be like, oh, well, this happens in the music there. And like for them, they can learn choreography to nothing. So sometimes she would give me choreography and say, here's the choreography. Can you write to this? So it was like the reverse. Normally you would get, you know, you'd write something. And then, so we did a lot of that on another work entitled Revolution Dream, that was for Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. So what it does for me is when I look at movement or tempo, and she says, hey, well, look, I want it to, can you write this in 6, or the feeling of 6? And it's like at this tempo, and I need space in it, like here, and it's a dialogue between two, let's say how it is. It could be a solo person and ensemble. It could be a duet. It could be, you know, smaller size, could be like 4 or 5 people, like doing like an ensemble work. So all of those things or elements are important. And then it could be like, well, I want it to be like piano, and I want it to be sparse, and I don't want it to have time. So even, I mean, dancers are pretty amazing because they can dance with no time. So, and then it says, I've seen this. She was like, okay, now we're gonna set this choreography is gonna be set to this music, and like they got a special switch in their brains that then, okay, we'll lock the music into the movement. It's like crazy. It's like, how do you do that? You can just turn, like they can turn the switch on or off the choreography with the music or without the music. So it's like I guess, I don't know of another kind of discipline that they do that. For musicians, like you learn music, you can innately learn the song, or you go by the melody for the most part. That's the easiest way to learn songs. It's like if you follow the melody, you could never really get lost if you can hold it. But for them, they're just like, they just know the movement. So, but in conclusion to composing for dancers or for movement, I always have an element of like West African movement at the core of everything I write. Like there has to be some element of strong groove in it, because I feel like if you don't have any groove, you can't move. Like we're set with a groove. Our heartbeats, you lose that groove, that's it for you. Here anyway, you might be in the spiritual world, but in this physical world, we all move to a drum, and that's our heartbeat. So like all movement, you know, you need, and it's all based on vibration. So like just trying to fine tune the balance of things, finding balance, you know, and throughout a whole work, you know, there's elements. There's something that has to be slow. There's something that has to be like happy. There's something that has to be sad. And there's something that has to be resilient or hopeful. And there's something that also has to be optimistic. So if you have those elements in a story, it makes for a good story. If you don't have like those elements, and you can tell that through the music, through the movement, through many things, but all works, if they have those elements, generally they'll be good.
One of the questions that I was going to ask is, the work is informed, does the music come first, or when we're talking about working with a choreographer, does the music come first or does the dance come first? And obviously before you even begin, you ask a lot of clarifying questions to know where to start. You basically addressed that question for me. Are there times where, well, never mind, forget that question. What I was going to ask is, the music that you write for these things, given your background in spontaneous composition and quote-unquote jazz and all this stuff, are these things through composed? Are there elements when you're working with the choreographers where it's open for improvisation sections where the band is improvising and the dancers are dancing to that? Or is everything set through composed, like written on the page, and it's going to be played the same way every time?
It would depend on the choreographer, but the amount of space has to be set. So if somebody took a solo and it says, okay, they're going to solo for 2 courses, whatever that amount of time is, they would understand that. And then also, if you're performing live, it's completely different than if it's recorded, but still the amount of time and space is relatively the same. And we've done some live performances when I was with Jazz at Lincoln Center, and Alvin Ailey. We did some collaborations, Potted Duke, and sometimes if a guy has a solo and he plays it a little bit faster, the dancer would look back and be like, like, what are you doing? So, you know, it's an ebb and flow, but generally it's locked in to a certain degree. Like, I know we did Garth Fagan and Wynton Marsalis did a piece together that I played on. I forget what's the name. I can't think of the name of that ballet. Griot, New York. And there's a lot of playing in open sections or improvisation. However, it's over a certain amount of courses. So you have to play that amount of courses, otherwise people will miss the cues. But it's more, that was a little more free as far as the playing goes. But most of the time it's pretty specific, you know, to answer the question. Yeah, it's specific. Once the piece is set, yes.
I thought it was interesting because it's had to be like a year ago. You were playing me some of the stuff. It was either had just been like, maybe it was a rehearsal that was recorded, but the sound of the music, to me, listening to the groove and the way that was put together, could be something easily played on like quote unquote contemporary radio or something that would be, you know, standalone without choreography. Was that a byproduct of the project? Did you intend it to be that way, or what was your intent going into it?
Well, for one, at this stage of the journey, I want to present things that are very accessible. So with writing this music, I wanted the intentions or the emotions, like, so this was, he's referring to the work I did recently that premiered in 2023 in October at the Joyce Theater, entitled States of Hope. So all of the emotions are pretty, you know, conformist, daughter of Job, determined. What's the other one? There's one that's called Happy Feet. There's one that's called Afro Feet. All of the things are very direct. So when you hear them, the melodies are very clear. The intention is very clear, and it's not complicated. And I also was composing this work where if you got high school players that could play on a decent level, they could play this music. It's accessible to them. Like, they won't be like a pro, you know, with all of the nuances or everything, but if you gave them the music, they could play it. So it's playable. Like, they'd have to practice, but it's not like, oh, you have no chance at playing this.
No disrespect. So we're talking about like the Herbie Hancock Watermelon Man of choreography. Is that what we're discussing here?
Well, I mean, you could use that, but it's very accessible and it will sound good. It's like, you know, people talk about Duke Ellington's genius or his greatness, and if you've ever studied a Duke Ellington score and you look at it, it's so organized, and it looks very simple, because to the most part it is very simple, but it sounds amazing. And that's the thing of excellence or greatness. It's not like, okay, this guy wrote all of these notes and it's like, no, it's very simple and very direct, and it sounds good, and it lasts the test of time. So those things have inspired me to move in another direction. And when you're young, you know, you're trying stuff, you're experimenting, and you do all of this stuff, and I've done some of that as well. So I will definitely say, yeah, I've written a bunch of crazy music, and just like, yeah, it's cool. And it's achievement, like, yeah, we did it, but it's like, yeah, you're not trying to be like, oh yeah, let's do that again. It's like, so you kind of live and you learn, and the more, you know, the longer I stay on the journey, the more you learn about the power of simplicity and the power of space, you know, and accessibility. You know, it's accessible.
Can you talk about, yes, the power of space and yeah, the power of simplicity?
The young people hate for me talking
well,
about
no,
this.
here's I want you to mention this because it means way more and has a way more weight coming from you and your experience than it comes from me. Can you talk about the power of dynamics?
I mean, it's just like anything. I mean, for there to be loud, there has to be soft. It's like for there to be good, there has to be bad. Like if everything, it's rules of nature. So, like playing a drum kit doesn't mean it has to be loud all of the time. Like drums, generally for acoustic instruments, are by far can play louder than all of the instruments, probably combined. So there's no achievement necessarily like, oh yeah, I can play loud. I mean, yeah, they're just loud. Now, there's an achievement if you can play very controlled or controlling your sound. It's like dancers with movement. I had a friend that she basically gave me, she was a dancer for Ailey. She gave me a master class on just like holding a position just 1 second longer than someone else is like huge. And it's like just 1 second. But to hold that pose, or, you know, you see somebody, you know, it could be a plie or what's the, where they're on one leg and they're extended, but they're full extension and everything, their lines are perfect, but they hold it just a little bit longer, like a second and a half, which is so difficult to do from somebody that just hits it and then they leave it. So it's the same as somebody that gets on a drum kit and they can play time at a dynamic level that's like, whoa. You hear everything. You can hear all of the other instruments, but it's like you feel the drums, but you don't hear the drums. Like, I think that sums it all up. Where they're not sticking out, or any instrument, or like being able to play a saxophone with an unbelievable sound, like a big sound, but then also to be able to control the sound. Like, do you have control over your instrument? So the instrument is just an extension of you. That's what I tell people all the time. The instrument is just some metal, or it's just some material. It's you that makes the instrument. I've seen so many great musicians pick up kids' instruments, and the kid looks at the instrument after they play it and go like, what? Like it's a magic trick. Like, what? It's true. I mean, that's just practice, you know. So
Going back to a lot of these things that you're talking about, compositional devices, working with choreography. I've been very fortunate to play several gigs with you, and what I noticed about you on the drums versus other drummers, and again, I'm not talking trash about anybody, is I can tell that you're thinking compositionally throughout the entire piece, not only during your solo, but during everyone else's, but also from start to finish of the song. When did that begin for you? When did you start thinking about it along those lines? Was that always from the beginning? Because as you say, some drummers just get on there and play time, and that's all they're thinking about is playing time. And that's why there's so many jokes about drummers, and usually the butt of jokes. When did you begin thinking that way in terms of playing? Not just for composing, but for every, you're always composing, but you know what I'm saying. I believe you understand.
well, there are three musicians that come to mind directly in my development as a kid, you know, like 8, 9, 12, 15 years old. And all three of them are great musicians, and they also happen to be great percussionists. One of them's name is Lawrence Williams. He's no longer with us. An amazing composer, but musician and orchestrator of the drums. And so he was always playing the music. He wasn't just playing, oh, I'm just playing the beat. He was painting. And an amazing composer. Like some of his music they're like standards. Like if you're a Detroit musician on the scene, like there's a song entitled Number 3 that everyone plays. I was around him and under his tutelage when he was composing this festival time. This name of the work is a long form piece, but he numbered, all of the songs are numbers. I think it goes up to like 13 or 14. But number 1, number 2, number 3. So number 3 is the one that is really popular, and it's a very difficult tune to play as well. But anyway, he's one influence. Other one is Roy Brooks. Played on many, many albums, you know, through, you know, the 50s and 60s. But he was someone that used percussion and sound to orchestrate. And he's the first person I saw to score a film, like back in the old days, like silent films. Like I watched a performance of him scoring a film. It was like a civil rights documentary with no sound, just images, and he scored it on a drum kit. Some of the most amazing work that you would ever see. So he's somebody that was super progressive and someone that would integrate other art forms. So he had a group called the Artistic Truth, where it would present like all kind of different. He had basketball. He loved playing basketball as well. So he have like Harlem Globetrotters come out and play, and they're playing ball while he's playing the drums, and then change and transfer of the rhythm of the movement of the game. So he was super high level, and he also played the musical saw. So he would play a saw and to pitches like blues, things ain't what they used to be on the saw. So that was a huge influence. So it was percussion in the context of music. It wasn't percussion in the context of, okay, I just play a beat and I'm just playing the drums. And the third person in my young early development was Max Roach. And his work speaks for itself. And I've had the great honor and privilege to study directly with them, not listen to albums. And that's what sometimes I have to emphasize that to young people. Like, I know these people. I knew them. I went to their house. I studied with them. I shut up, and they would talk, and I would listen and take notes and just be grateful for the perspectives that they had or the things that they learned on their journey. So taking all of those things, that gave me a foundation to go off into the direction that I went. So I take their work as like you're standing on the shoulders of your forefathers or you know, the people that came before you. So they were a huge influence in my approach to playing the instrument. So If that answers the
Most definitely. I mean, you kind of answered some of these things earlier talking about choreography, but I know with the younger generation as teachers, sometimes things go over the head. So what I would ask you one more time just to drive it home is if we're talking about not just drummers, but musicians, to get them out, because the big part of this is when they're learning how to play is getting a good sound, getting a good sense of time, getting vocabulary together. But once they have that, getting to the point where they're thinking compositionally, not just with their own solos, but across the band. So what would be some advice that you would give to musicians of all abilities, whether they're beginners or maybe they're advanced, but they're just not thinking that way? What would you tell them to start thinking along those lines, thinking compositionally?
first place, start simple. I know it's boring. People might think it's boring. Simplicity is the most powerful thing. Anyone that does anything on the highest level, just think about it. I guarantee you their fundamentals are impeccable. God bless you over there. It's just facts. Whatever. If you're an engineer, it's like, yeah, you're not gonna meet an engineer that doesn't know basic math. It's just not gonna happen.
You might in 2024.
I mean, well, yeah. If everything becomes automated and then people don't have to use their brains to do fundamental things, then I mean, it's an interesting perspective or case argument. Well, it'll give you time to work on other things that are more complex, maybe for some people, but it's like a process of strength or getting stronger. If you go through all of the levels, your foundational understanding and knowledge will be very strong, which gives you a different perspective. And certain things you just can't go around. Like, you're not going to play an instrument and be great and sound good if you can't do basic fundamental things. You can't just jump to level 10 and you can't do level 2. It's like,
You said something once, and maybe, hopefully I can get this correct. If I don't, let me know. But I think you said if the foundation, like you were using in the context of building a house, you said if the foundation is strong, it doesn't really matter what you build. Am I getting this right, or you want to clarify that?
well, depends on how strong the foundation is. So, I mean, I don't know what the building codes are in Washington, but if you have a foundation that goes down 4 stories, I mean, you could build a skyscraper. Now, you could also build a 2-story house. I mean, you got a hell of a foundation, but somebody could say, well, let's tear this down and build a skyscraper. If the foundation is that strong, yeah, you could do it. So it depends on what level are you trying to get to. And man, and that's one of the first questions I ask any aspiring musician. Like, where do you see yourself? Like, if you just want to play like a couple of basic tunes or this, that, that's great. So you still can't get away from fundamentals. And so what generally happens is somebody that says, oh, I just want to get to this level, and they're diligent, they end up getting to a way higher level because they take the foundational thing serious and they go further than they could expect. It's like running a race. I ran a marathon, my first marathon earlier this year. And my goal was, before I even started any training or like really training for it properly, I said my goal is to run 5K every day. No matter what the pace. I said I'll start slow. By the time I got into like the second week, my times exponentially got, I was faster. And so then by the time I started training 3 weeks in, I'm like, you're almost ahead of the curve. Then it's like my baseline runs, I was like 5K, whatever. Then was 7K, 10K, 15K, up to, I think, a few weeks before I ran a 32K. But it's all just mindset and being diligent. And so I was like, you want to play on a certain level. And for drums, it's funny. It's a weird instrument in the sense of you don't have to practice every day, but if you don't put in a lot of reps when you're young for the muscle memory, you just won't get it. It's like trumpet players. They have to practice every day because it's a muscle that they have to, but they can't play too much every day. It's weird. They must play every day, but they can't play super long. Bass players, they have to play to a level where they have calluses and the muscle memory. Like there's a physical aspect to every instrument, and every instrument has its thing. You know, like French horn. It's like a crate, man. I would never play. I tried French horn. It was like just to get an attack, like to hit a note perfect. I don't know if it's like you can even do it. I mean, I talked to principals in the symphony, and they're like, man, even for us, we haven't been doing it. It's like sometimes you don't know what'll come out. So with drums, it's muscle memory over years of practice. And when you see somebody play, and I've heard this, I wanted to be like, I've seen it from other great drummers. Like you see them play and it looks like they're doing nothing. It's because there's so many hours of doing it where it doesn't look difficult. But if you try to get up there and do it, you be like, it's a different story. So I would say getting your foundation, getting your base is always super important because you can always build on it. Even if you wait to build the skyscraper on that plot of land, if you got a big, deep foundation, you can build whatever you want.
Well, I could barrage you with questions that monopolize the rest of the time, but I know we have some folks here in the live audience, but also online. So if you have any questions for myself or Ali at this time, please let us know. Do we have any questions? Yes, you in the white T-shirt.
So, yesterday the radio showed me this program that's AI, and it made music that could be played on the radio, listen. And I found that deeply troubling. I just kind of want to know your perspective on how much of a threat is that to artists. Will there always be some aspect of artificially created music that is separate from organic music?
So the question is, it's a long-winded question. I'll do my best to sum this up. It's regarding AI and AI-generated music. And say that one more time. Is
So, is it a major threat
is AI a major threat to
to actual artistry?
actual artistry,
Some aspect of it that is separate from organic created?
or is there some aspect of it that is separate from organically created music? Your opinion. That is noticeable.
Well, I mean, I have a hell of a lot of opinions on that. I'm going to start with a quote from amazing scholar and a very wise man, Noam Chomsky. And he said, I can't do his voice good, but he was like, basically, all AI is high-level plagiarism. That's what it is. So whatever the computer or AI, and it's learning, but you have to feed it something to learn. So you're feeding it other people's work or compositions, and it's picking and choosing how to assimilate it. So that's number one. Is it troubling with music and art? Yes, because, I mean, people are lazy. Like we were just talking about the topic of building a foundation. What does that do? It costs you time and focus and energy. However, on this other flip side of it, it's very healthy for you, your spirit and your soul and your mind to invest that time into learning a skill. So those are the aspects that people need to figure out. Because something is fast and it's easy and you can do it doesn't mean it's better. It's like the thing that with technology. What was the whole Microsoft system crashed with all the airline stuff recently? And I was in one of the airports and no one knows how to do anything manually. Like people just standing around. Like, what does that tell you? Like, I mean, there used to be like tickets and people would have to write things down and actually account for things. So that's the time we're in. So it's having an impact. Will it have an impact on art? Yeah, first off, the level of just was, I want to go back a little bit, and then my answer is just only, how can I say, a recounting of facts. Everyone probably remembers when they introduced the beat machine. And what is that? It's a computer that basically takes the place of a drummer. Now, in the beginning, they weren't that complicated. They couldn't do a whole lot of things. It couldn't really do what a drummer could do. However, it started to take people became more and more familiar. Then what was next? Sampling. People would sample somebody else's work and put it in their work, and it's creative. So I'm not to say that it's not creative. It takes some creative ability, but it's not the same as somebody creating it from scratch. And notice that how, as we've evolved, everything sounds the same. When I listen to music from the 60s, if you go back 50s, 60s, 70s, the diversity of music and artists, like everyone's different. And that's what made it beautiful and made it great. Everyone had a different perspective. Now everything sounds the same. So that should be more frightening. I mean, it's along the lines like, I mean, if AI is making songs, I mean, it just shows you how messed up we are as humans when people can accept that. And I always say, there's always this thing in music where, or in the music business, I would say more so in the business context, you need to play music people like. And that's very interesting because I say, well, who are the people? Well, it's not popular. Well, what does that mean? Like, jazz could be popular if you put the same investment or marketing into that, or modern dance or tap dance or whatever you want to market or promote. If you put money behind it, people will be aware of it. And generally, the minds of people, once you're aware, it becomes familiar. And once it becomes familiar, then it's like, okay, you kind of trust it. Whether it's good or bad. It's just how our minds work. It's just like the psychology of humans. Like once something becomes familiar and it's introduced to you multiple times, you kind of take your guard down, and then you just be like, well, I guess it's good because I know about it. Not because it's necessarily good. It's just you just are familiar. It's like food. I mean, what's the most popular food? I'm not going to give any commercials. They don't need them. But
We want those sponsors. Be careful now.
Well, I mean, we've run out of time, I think, in society. This is a good segue into the fact of we can only be good as good as our investment. Like you all are here investing your time into just hearing a perspective. Maybe you knew what you were going to hear. Maybe you aren't the people that should be here because you probably maybe think the same way. But it's like you being open to a perspective that can help you be a critical thinker or objective thinker about the choices that you make in this world, on this journey. And so if you're a follower in the sense of, all right, I'm going to just consume whatever I'm told to consume or whatever's familiar to me, or I'm not going to do my own research. And that's the thing that I find almost equally troubling as AI is young people will not make an investment. Don't take my word for it. You investigate it and you come back to me and what you learn in your investigation. Like they don't want to do that. Like whatever the algorithm is feeding me on my social media feed is what I like And that's what I was reinforcing what I like. If something tells me something different, oh, I don't like that, because it challenges me to actually have to do some research or takes me out of my comfort zone. And I feel like education in generally is all about being out of your comfort zone. That's what education is. And whatever. It's like, how are we going to pay these bills this month? Well, we're going to educate ourselves on how we're going to do that. Or, you know, how are we going to educate about healthy habits? Well, we're going to figure that, we got to figure that out. So in terms of AI, and this is really sad because the government that is actually supposed to protect the people has just let the wolf run wild in the hen house. So it's not like you could put a cap back on AI. So all of these movies that were predicting this stuff, Terminator and you name it, I don't know how, what's the other, the Matrix, we're living in it. It's here. So once the computer figures out, it's like, oh, humans are dumb. Who's to say they're not controlling everything now? I can't, I mean, who can definitively say?
What do you mean, Ollie?
Hey, if we can think it, it's probably been done. Someone else can think it.
We're in the final 5 minutes here. Are there any more questions for myself or Ollie? Any online questions? Not at the moment. Any questions from our audience here? Live audience. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question from Michigan. And have you ever been to the Detroit Jazz Festival?
Question is, have you ever been to the Detroit Jazz Festival?
I have been to the festival, and I've performed the festival, can't think of how many times, but at least over a half a dozen times. I was last there featured with my ensemble in 2019. So, yeah, and I'm from Michigan as well. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You spoke earlier about the working with dancers and choreographers. So there is a philosophy in dance that dancing is what happens in between the steps. So can you talk about that correlation with music?
So the question is for those listening online is, can you talk about dancing is what happens in between the steps, is the phrase, correct?
Yeah.
Can you discuss that, your opinions?
Absolutely true. And in the musical terms, music happens in the space. So after the notes are, the music is happening after the notes are played. So it's a similar concept, like the feeling in the movement, like steps are steps. Can you make the steps come to life? It's the same with notes on a page. I could give you music, but that's not music. I mean, you could play all of the notes correctly and in time and all of that, but that doesn't make it music. And I see a lot of that also in schools. So everyone is studying music and people are playing, and I can't, it's not like I can't put direct blame on educators or teachers, because sometimes those teachers were not educated in the same way, so they don't know. They only know what they were taught. So what happens is you have this cycle that continues to proliferate where people don't understand that concept of, you know, dancing happens, you know, beyond the steps. So a lot of technical ability, but not a lot of soul. And that's what I see everywhere. I hope that answers your question.
Other questions? Was there a question online, or you had a question? You, ma'am, in the front.
The three people that inspired you in your career, was it a collaboration of the three that
So I believe the question is for what you were talking about earlier is your three mentors that inspired you to think compositionally. Is it kind of an amalgamation of those three, or was it kind of chronologically, like one led to the other? I think. Am I getting this question correct?
Ooh, well, first, those three were, I chose those three individuals, Lawrence Williams, Roy Brooks, and Max Roach, because of their approach to the instrument. Now, I heard you mention about my career and the trajectory or trying to be excellent. That just came from maybe me being a product of growing up in the time that I grew up and in the environment that I grew up in, because it was cutthroat. They didn't care if you were a kid. Like, it's the opposite of what's going on out here now. You know, I can remember being 11 years old or 12 years old and being cussed out. Like, oh, get this kid out of here. Get him out. Wasn't friendly. And I take that, looking back, that's great. Because it was just preparation of your serious, like, how serious are you? I was teaching at Juilliard, and I told my students, all of them in one class, I said, I'm here to make all of you quit. That's my job. And you're going to thank me 15, 20 years from now. I said, because you don't really want this lifestyle. And I know you're probably like, some people like, yeah, I say, because if you are good enough and you're successful enough and you have your skin is thick enough to do it, then the grind begins. I was super successful at a very young age, traveling, touring the world or whatever. That's not a fun lifestyle. People think it's glamorous. It's like, that's not fun. You sacrifice whatever family, if you're trying to have a family or the family you do have, you're traveling, relationships, weddings, funerals, family reunions, hanging out with your friends, like all that's gone. You're working in your field. That's what it used to be. So now, if you're not trying to be excellent, what are you trying to be? And that's not a question for me to answer. That's a question for them to answer. If you want to be excellent, I'm here to help you be excellent. And these are the things you have to do to be excellent. If you don't want to do them, it's fine. That's not, but like I told you, quit now and be at peace and be happy, or continue to be on the grind. But I shared with them, I said, these are the things that are required of being serious. And it was just simple stuff. Like, do you go to the rehearsals of Jazz and Lincoln Center that's right down the street from where you live? And I've seen none of you guys there for a whole year, and it's free. What does that say about you? What are you doing? You working that much? You got that many gigs? You guys are doing your thing that much that you don't need to? And it was completely quiet. I swear to you. They did not say one word. I said, I'm just telling you. You might not want to hear it, and I'm saying it nicely. Like, I was like, I grew up, man, they would I've seen people pull out pistols and knives over music because they're that serious about it. It's like you look at athletics in college, man, coaches cussing out players left and right. And guess what? If you don't do what the coach is asking you, guess what? You won't be playing, or you're transferred. You're gone. You're out of here. You're not holding your hand. I mean, women's sports too. It's not like man or women. I'm sure those women coaches be letting it rip on all of their players. I'm sure of it. I said, so, but for music, it's everybody gets a trophy. Like, no, man. It's like, don't get up on stage and not know the music. It's like a dancer. I think the dance world, man, I have so much respect for dancers. It's like they're at the top, man. Of like performing arts, they're at the top. Because first off, they don't miss a day of taking class. Like serious dancers, they're in class every 2 classes. So their bodies, they have to keep their bodies in tip-top shape. Their minds are in tip-top shape to learn choreography like that. I mean, I watched Matt Rushing teach choreography, and Matt Rushing is one of the all-time great dancers. Danced with Ailey for many, many years and been featured with all kind of other companies. But I think he is now is the interim director at Alvin Ailey currently. But I watched him give a student, they were in Ailey 2, choreography. I swear to you, one time. And I wasn't, and for me, let's say I'm not a professional dancer, but I've been around the dance world and I'm familiar. This young lady, he gave her the choreography, I swear to you, once. And she had the choreography, I'm talking about at least like a 2-minute piece of choreography. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. And she did that stuff in one time. I could have just walked out of the building. I was like, man, I ain't never seen nothing like that. That fast. And they're learning multiple pieces in multiple parts. So I was like, man, I have the utmost respect for dancers. Just, they like a different breed. They different. And then some of them will go out and hang out all night and then get up at 8 in the morning and be in class. It's like,
All right, this is a good place to stop. Ollie, thank you so much for being our guest again. This is, I think, the 4th or 5th one of these that we've done at this point. I think we're in our 4th year of doing this at the Museum of Glass and other venues, so there's tons of backlog material, interviews, concerts. If you want to watch it, it's all on our YouTube channel for free. You don't have to log in. You don't have to sign up for anything. Just click on it, watch it, enjoy it. There's lots of great perspectives that Ollie's given us now over the years. So thank you again for being our guest, Ollie. How about it for Ollie Jackson, ladies and gentlemen?
my pleasure, my honor. Thank y'all for having me.
Thank you all for joining us. We're going to take a very brief pause, get the instruments configured here, look at some brand new music to us anyways, and get ready for the concert at 3 o'clock. So come back and join us if you'd like. And again, we do this at the Museum of Glass on the 3rd Sunday of every month. The live streams are always absolutely free to watch. If you find value in the work that we're doing and you want to support it, feel free, if you're watching online, feel free to make a donation via Venmo or PayPal. Or you can, if you're here in person and you want to support, you can do that way as well. Other than that, thank you so much, and we'll be right back after a short break. Thanks.